Hi everybody, it's Tatiana, and today I'm doing another book review, and I am reviewing Black Boy by Richard Wright. I debated about whether or not I would actually do a review for this book, simply because I was reading it out of my own curiosity. I did not get the opportunity to read any of the Richard Wright novels that some of my other classmates and the classmen before me got to read in high school, because I was in a pilot program for an honors English and literature course load, and so yeah, we skipped all of this stuff and read more of some of the classic literature versus, I don't know what you would phrase it as, but because of that program, that's how I got to read a lot of the Kafka and the Tolstoy and the Bradbury and the Scarlet Letter, those things, and I missed out on getting a chance to read these novels. So strictly out of curiosity, because I really wanted to read it, I was always intrigued by the covers, but I had an incredibly heavy reading load during these courses, so I just didn't get the chance to read them in high school, and so I said I'm going to just take some time to do this. And Denise over at Denise D. Cooper, whose channel I will link in the description box below, made July Richard Wright month, so I said, this is a little perfect. So I borrowed Black Boy from the library, as well as Native Son and The Outsider. Those are the next on my list to read. I will probably not finish them this month, which is July at the time when I'm recording this. It's actually the last week of July. But before I started reading this, I did not know that this was an autobiography. I totally skipped over the little tab from the library on the back which says biography, and I did not read the back of the novel, which explains in the first half of the first sentence that it's an autobiography. I placed it on hold at the library and went and picked it up and checked it out. So I am not a huge nonfiction reader. So this is, I think, the second autobiography that I have read, the first being 12 Years a Slave, which I read in 2014. I really enjoyed this. I don't want to call it a novel because it's not. But I really enjoyed it. It is split into two parts, and I must say that I enjoyed the first part of it better than, or more than, the second part. The first part, there was really an emotional connection, I think, that was made between Richard and the reader, and the Black experience in the South. A lot of the things that he experienced and gave forth in the novel are things that I have heard from my older family members. Similar stories, not necessarily exact duplicates, but very similar stories about their experience in the South. And the only difference is they did not move around a lot as Richard did. Richard did a lot of moving when he was a kid. The people that I get the stories from the most were my paternal grandparents, and my grandmother did not move until she met my grandfather, and then they moved to North Carolina. And upon learning that there was a greater opportunity for Blacks to go to school and be educated, because I think she only got through 6th grade or 9th grade. I'm totally blanking on that right now. But where she was from in Missouri, when she moved to North Carolina, she actually brought her mom, my great-grandmother, and her youngest brother, Uncle Coleman, up to North Carolina to live with her. At the time, my grandfather had entered into the service, and so he was a soldier, and while home, he did end up doing a lot of moving around. But she moved the two of them to North Carolina so that my Uncle Coleman would have the opportunity to go further in school than she did. Eventually, she did get her high school diploma, which is I didn't realize how great of a feat it was for her until I got much older. But so a lot of the stories and things that he relates in the first part of the novel, the book, I can greatly relate to, because I've heard similar stories of that growing up and just listening to and talking to the older members of my family. I really found it interesting learning and hearing his experience, because he was a boy who never really fit in, and that, above everything else, is what really stood out to me once I got to the second part of the novel, because he found something that he finally did fit in, which ended up being the Communist Party, and that turned out being just a huge clusterfuck of confusion in the latter years of his life, which just was very interesting. He just, as a kid though, he never fit in. He was set apart, and for somehow, even though he grew up in the South and he knew the black experience, he experienced some of the black experience, he came up with this lack of knowledge of what the expected role of blacks in the South was supposed to be. And so because of that, he had a lot of difficulty relating to even some of his friends, much less the white people in the South who he worked for. It made things quite difficult for him. I'm glad that I read this, and I have to say, after reading 12 Years a Slave and now this, it's got me looking a little differently at the autobiography and the work of nonfiction. I was completely against reading nonfiction as a kid and as a teenager, as a young adult. My father tried to convince me to read nonfiction novels, and my response was, I have a life that I'm living, and I'm good with living that. And for experiences from other people, I have family members that I can talk to. I don't have to necessarily read somebody else's story to get somebody else's story. And so I was just not feeling the nonfiction novel game or nonfiction story game, but I am looking at that a little differently. Yay for personal growth, I guess. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars simply because I didn't really care for the second part of the novel. The information was good, but there was less of an emotional connection. I think the second part of the novel was written from more of an intellectual perspective as opposed to some of the emotional efforts that went into the writing of the first part of the story. And while the information was good, there are some things that were, while not necessarily giving a lot of information about the Communist Party, if you're not politically adept, which I certainly am not, I really don't pay that much attention to politics beyond the major political forces in the U.S., and even for that, I don't pay an extreme amount of attention to. So while knowing the history, and because I am a lover of German and Russian history, and as much as I can get through historical fiction novels, while knowing a little bit about the Communist Party, never really understanding what the Communist Party really was, why they were necessarily such a bad thing. I give the information that's given in the novel, in this story, I keep saying novel, about his experience with the Communist Party really cleared a lot of that up for me and helped me to get a better understanding of why there were so many people who were against the Communist Party. And while no party is perfect, every party has its flaws, but just being able to get some first-hand information, I guess, about something that I'd never really been able to find an explanation of, and I probably haven't been able to find an explanation of it because I don't read a lot of nonfiction. So I'm curious to know how this was discussed in the high school classroom with the students who read this. I'm kind of thinking about possibly doing a series about my high school reading experience because while it was a good effort, on the part of my school system. I don't think that I got out of it, or what was done with it was really what should have been done for the students to get the best out of the program. And I'm sure since I was in a pilot program that it's improved since then. But if you're curious in knowing about that, I may do it anyway, but if you're curious about hearing my high school reading experience, let me know in the comments below, and I will really put some effort into putting that together. It's not something that could be done in one video. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, let me know in the comments below, and I really have no problem sharing that with you all. So that's all that I'm going to say about this, because I think it goes into jabber-jawing and rants beyond that. So I am going to let that go for now, and I hope you all have a good weekend whenever you see this video. Peace out.